So and then after that, of course, I decided to move to UCL, the Institute of Education, at the University College London. And so what I probably would like to therefore say that actually my strategies, my personal individual strategies in coping with teaching and learning really have not changed. I have not changed, I think, in terms of what you know what works or what doesn't work for me as well. But one thing that I can truly say perhaps is that what has changed is the culture of learning and teaching,
Mm.
or the culture of work
Mm.
in UCL. And that, I
Mm-hmm.
think, to me,
Mm-hmm.
makes a whole world of difference, because while I haven't really changed in terms of my specific strategies, for the past many years, I have always made it a point not to answer emails in the morning. I don't know whether that works for everyone, but I really don't, because by answering emails in the morning, it will eat up the whole day, the whole session, the whole morning, basically, for me. So usually I do some email stuff and runs in the afternoon, but in the morning I start thinking about my work, because I basically work, early morning and so on and so forth. There are times when I changed, that strategy as well. I finish everything in the morning, and then I don't read my emails in the afternoon and start doing my work as well. So I had been doing that for quite some time. I continue to do that now. But I think, to me, as what I said, it is really the culture of work that has changed really tremendously. So that's basically the segue that I would like to make into what I think are very crucial points, at least for me personally, that have um, made me a little bit more productive, and probably a little bit, how do I call it? Probably a bit happier in doing research. My passion for research hasn't changed. I've always said that no matter what, I'm a researcher, and I've always wanted to be a researcher. But I think if the institution or the culture doesn't really allow you, or doesn't give you to give as much space as you probably want or need, you can only do so much, really. And so 3 points basically in this culture of work that I have encountered and I'm experiencing at the moment. Now, just to um, you know, just a bit of a trivia. For example, when I first met my director, when I started work here in UCL, the first thing that he mentioned to me, because he was part of the selection committee, was, we did not hire you because of your potential to be a good scholar. We hired you because you are a good scholar. It made me a bit, well, it got me to think about it and reflect on it. And I think it brings me to my first point about this whole culture of work, which is that this particular space that I inhabit in at the moment, really privileges or allows you to be independent, an independent worker, to be an independent scholar. It really helps you track. It allows you to track and determine your own research narrative, for example, without, let's say, institutions and governments, back in my earlier experience, basically telling you, what counts must have something to do with this, what doesn't count is this, and you have to explain it in particular ways, basically. And so it is important to bear in mind that I think this is something that I, first and foremost, really um, you know realize, that now I have started to be, to start, becoming, more independent in the way I track my own research program. No one has ever, since the selection interviews, no one has ever come back to me and said, okay, so tell us about your narrative, tell us about where your research is going. And since then, no one has ever come back to me and said, basically ask questions about what I do. And I think that is when I realized that, the meaning of that statement of the director, to me at the start of my work, which is, where we didn't hire you because of your potential. we hire you because you can do independent work today, from now on, and we trust you for, tracking your own research paradigms and your own research programs as well. And I think that to me is what I value very well, because we are all researchers here, and part of being a researcher is really to um, to be able to explore dimensions of knowledge that we would love to study. But if there are institutions, if there are stumbling blocks along the way, for example, then research becomes quite heavy. Research becomes quite double duty in a sense, because it's something that doesn't really come out from how you want to see the world through your own research. So yes, so that's the first thing. And I think, to me, I wouldn't be able to, that's what I said earlier. I think it goes both ways. You want to be an independent scholar, but I think the culture or the institution within which you inhabit should be able to give you that space for independent work as well. The second one is flexible. I think it's a very, very flexible line of work. We are able to, at least for me and with my own department, and Zach would most likely have something to say about this too, we are able to negotiate the kind of load that we would like to have. So for example, in this semester I'm doing research, then perhaps give me a little bit of less teaching, but next semester I look forward to more of that teaching as well. So there is that kind of flexibility that would allow you to to be productive, both in teaching as well as also for research. But then again, of course, it's always a question of, if I am asked to produce, does the culture or does the system allow me to produce? And I think I was able to find that space here as well. In very tangible terms, for example, they want us to do research. So, teaching is, I must say, far much less than my experience for more than 20 years, prior to coming to London. This semester, for example, I teach only about basically a total of 18 hours in a semester, and that's it for teaching. Probably a little bit more if you have to quantify your marking of your essays and consultations with students beyond the actual teaching time. But basically, when you're talking about sessions, teaching sessions, it's basically just 1 month in a semester, and that's 3 hours basically in one session. So so that's basically it. And I guess it's not so much that you don't want to teach. In fact, I love teaching, and I think Dr. Myron knows this, back in NIE and in Singapore. But I guess it really is a question of whether how much time is given to you in order for you to to find independent work in your own research. And so that kind of flexibility has allowed me to explore, or to design my own research program for the next year, for example, precisely because everything is not cast in stone. So it's always negotiation. So in fact, last semester I did not teach at all. I only asked for 5 dissertation students, or actually 6 dissertation students. And that's basically it I did last semester. So next semester, I was given three sessions to teach from January. So of course, if I have 3 sessions, then I ask, so just give me only 2 or 3 dissertation students, right? So this is the kind of flexibility that I was talking about as well. And in a sense, because of my desire to do research myself, so it doesn't really come out like artificial for me to want to do research. I just needed the space. I just needed the opportunity within which I can produce and conduct research. And I think the institution has provided me with such such spaces. And lastly, the third one is think is a really highly collaborative environment. Um, it I have not, I mean, the department by itself is usually very collegial, and the idea is really to come together. In fact, now we continue to have teas and coffees online, not to talk about work basically, but to talk about you know you know anything, just to get us be, I think, familiar and comfortable with one another. Because at the end of the day, when you write proposals, you need to write proposals with other people as well. There is a culture of sharing, for example, of research. There's a culture of sharing of, information about what you've done, outside, the academe as well. And when I say collaborative, it's also very constructive and positive environment, whereby, at least you feel very affirmed by the things that you do. And having said that, just to give you one example, for example, I'm not sure who is in social media or very heavy on social media, but I'm quite active in social media, like on Facebook, for example, or on Twitter. And my work, I've always been an advocate of, your work being able to, being read, and of having an impact on people outside the academe. It's not so much. It makes me a bit uncomfortable, talking about, inequalities of multilingualism, which basically is the topic of my research program, the inequalities, and addressing it, and yet not talking to people who will be directly impacted by such inequalities of multilingualism. So in social media, I write, I produce, and articles that get published in national dailies in the Philippines, for example, with the hope that that I interact with and engage with people who will also be interested in, who are very much invested in questions about language, questions about dialects, questions about multilingualism and multilingual education. So a lot of my work, other than what I publish, is published in national newspapers, for example. And interestingly, only very recently, about I think 3 weeks ago or a week ago, the marketing arm, the IT arm of the Institute of Education of UCL, emailed the department, that my director and the rest of some of the personnel and of the management, basically saying, one of my articles has been seen over on Twitter a number of times, to the point that it has become actually the highest, the most seen and read article, that the Institute of Education has put forward in social media. And I think, to me, that is one great recognition, because they see the impact of your research, not only in terms of the matrices, but the impact of research in the larger community, that supposedly is being addressed by your own research, and yet ignored probably by academic questions. And more than that, it was taken up in meetings, for example, and basically affirming what I have done. I never, in fact, I did not share it with anyone, all these publications of mine, because I feel that it is a personal advocacy of mine to be able to communicate my research to a much wider audience. But I think it's the institution that has come back to me and said, you're doing a great job, basically. And the impact that you have shown here is something that is beyond just what we are, what the limited expectations are, as far as academic publications are concerned. And so it gives me, of course, I don't want to give the impression that this is where we're going and that we're forgetting the rest. All right. What I'm saying is that there is a much wider range of understanding of what impact really means. And so when they treat you as one whole scholar, not in terms of numbers, not in terms of metrics, I think it humanizes you as a scholar as well as an academic. And I think we know that I think in an academic world now, I think if sometimes there's a tendency for institutions to think of people as numbers, and it's numbers, and the kinds of what your citations like are, so on and so forth. And interestingly, having been, in this, in quite a good, reputable institution, I've never been not so concerned about these things anymore. It's like they really look at you as, a scholar, as in your totality, as a scholar, and your reputation basically then, can, be brought up not only in terms of your publications, but your impact on the wider community. Okay, so that's about it, and I hope to be able to dialogue with everyone later. Thank you.
Thank you, Rwani. Zach?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Myra, and to just echo what Rwani said, really appreciate the warm welcome. I do hope that you will put questions or comments in the chat box, or you can interrupt me. I'm very interruptible. So please raise a hand, just start speaking out, do a dance, whatever you need to do, but please feel free to at any point, let me know what you're thinking if you have questions. I was quite lucky. I kind of fell into my own doctoral program when I got my doctorate, and it happened to be a top 10 program in the world. And like I said, it wasn't because I was necessarily academically qualified. I happened to work with a supervisor who really just thought my work was interesting and what I wanted to do was interesting. And so he took me on, and this is in the US. And then from there, I ended up in Singapore, which again, highly competitive, top 10, top 15 institute in the world, and then ended up here at UCL. And so when I think about my own personal journey, I want to talk kind of about two different things broadly. One is kind of what I feel like is important as a scholar to balance them all. But now my role is really more leadership. I'm an academic head of learning and teaching, and I have quite a few leadership responsibilities here at UCL. And so I think I'd also like to talk a little bit about those, if that's okay. And if that's not okay, when I start talking about them, just tell me not to. Like I said, I'm very good at taking directions from Myra. I've learned to do that as well. So the first thing, when I think about personal scholarship and when I think about personal productivity, I think the main thing in academia is, keep your main goal your main goal. I think we can get there's so many opportunities that can come up, and we can get pulled in so many ways and things like that. And what is your passion? And this is not some motivational speech. This is really pragmatic, right? If you want to be good, you keep the main thing the main thing. And that means saying no to sometimes to things that might sound exciting, or, that might put your name in the lights, but they don't help you do the main thing. And I think that that's really important. And along with that, when we talk about kind of this best practices in teaching and service and research, they have to feed into each other. So almost everything that I take on feeds into service, and that feeds into my teaching, and that feeds back into my research. So for example, I started really looking at diversity. That was my main area when I started my own doctoral research, was diversity, especially around disability. But I've always been interested in how gender plays out, and how race plays out, and how, religion and all those things, and how we can create more inclusive environments. And so a project that I have right now going on, one of my research projects, is about the Black Lives Matter movement. And so as part of that, that's being incorporated into the small amount of teaching that I do. As I mentioned, I don't do a ton of teaching anymore, but there is a small amount of teaching, but it's also incorporated into all my service work. And so everything that it loops back into each other. So everything I learn in one area complements another, right? And I try not to take on too many things outside of those particular strands. The third thing I would say is work with really good people. I think if you can find great partners to work with, that is critical. People that are going to meet deadlines, that that you get along with. That's probably the most critical thing of all of them. you know, keep your main goal, feed everything into each other, but that's all has to be underpinned by working with great partners. And that doesn't mean they're great partners because they're at some fancy university or something like that. It's because you know you can work together. And part of that, and I think about my own work style, I have 3 to 4 people that I write with quite frequently. And we all have different roles. We all have different strengths. And so what are your strengths? We're not going to be great at everything. One of my strengths is the fact that I will take a blank piece and I'll just be the first one to put out ideas. You know, people can tell me they're wrong. They can edit them. We can work from there. But that's one of my strengths, is I'm willing to just throw my ideas out there and let them be kind of torn apart. I have another colleague who she is incredibly detailed, to the point sometimes that she gets, you know, paralyzed by perfection. She wants everything to be so perfect that she never quite gets things moving forward. And so she's great to have on our team because we can really complement each other in that. Another member of our team, he's the ideas guy. Like, he has all these crazy ideas about projects that we could do. So we've kind of found that we all work really well together because we have different strengths. And all 3 of us are at very different universities. But it's important to really know who those people are and identify them early and then work with them over and over again. I think another thing personally that's always helped me is I always work backward from deadlines. So if I say that I want something, you know, if for example, there's a grant project that I know is due in February, right? I've got to have something done for February. So what I do is I say, okay, if I need to have it done by February 1st, what I actually need to make sure is it's done by January 24th, a week ahead of time. So that way I have a little time for all tweaks, and then I literally work backwards. And so now, like I said, I don't do a lot of teaching, but I do supervise 8 doctoral students, and I have about 7 master students. And the first thing that we always do is say, okay, what are your deadlines? And we work backwards. And that's really, really helpful, because then I'm holding myself to account. I'm not thinking, okay, it's due February 1st. I'm thinking this part of it is due December 1st. And that helps me very, very much as I work forward. Always work backwards. I think the other thing is simplify your practice. So I have checklists and templates that I do for everything. So if you were to be a doctoral student of mine, your induction process is going to be the exact same as everyone else. I have a checklist that I follow for every doctoral student. I have a checklist that I follow for my own writing. I have a template of all my papers, and this is how I always start. That kind of regimentation is really, really important, and because it helps me, I don't have to think about, oh, where did I put that document? Or, oh, did I do that with that doc student yet? I've got a checklist. When I do it, I check it off and I just follow through. So it takes my mental energy off of the things that aren't important and lets me focus on the things that are important. That student, this grant, whatever that project may be. Make time for reading. And I know Myra's going to love me to hear me say that, but this is really, really important. And one of my areas of research is neuroscience. We know that reading is critical. It's critical for reflection. It's critical for development, but it's also really, really critical to consolidate all these things that we're learning. So make time to read. You know, I try to spend at least 20 minutes a day reading. That doesn't sound like a lot, but I build that into my work schedule. That's part of my working day, is 20 minutes a day reading. And it can be research articles, it can be novels, it can be something, but I constantly want to make sure I'm reading because we know how critical it is to our brains. The third thing, and I'm going to challenge people a little bit on this one real quick, is I'm sure that all of you have a to-do list, a list of things that you have to do. What's on your to-stop list? What are the things you need to stop doing? And I think that this is a really important one for us to go through and prioritize what we shouldn't be doing, right? And make a list and literally write down those things. I'm not going to do that anymore. Because that is also a key to productivity, right? Oftentimes when we talk about productivity, we talk about adding more, but sometimes productivity is really about taking things away. And so figuring out what you need to take away and what you can take away is really important. Riani talked about your best thinking time. Mine is also in the mornings. So I don't take any meetings before 11 a.m. If I need to set up a meeting, that's fine. But no, I don't take any other meetings before 11 a.m. That's just something that, you know, I'm able to do and I'm thankful to be able to do, but figure out your best teaching time, your best thinking time, and use that thinking time for the things that matter, the writing, the research, etc. but protect it. You have to protect it. You have to put those boundaries in place. And then the final one on the personal piece is, again, don't doubt yourself. Keep the main thing the main thing. And I think that that's really, really critical, because it's as you all know, it's easy to get pulled in 1,000 different directions, right? What is that main thing? Because at the end of the day, that passion is the only thing that's going to keep you up the next morning, that you're going to be excited about getting up for. So make sure that that's the main thing. If I can just, Myra, if I have just a few minutes, I can or I cannot go through some of the leadership things that I think are really important as well. Is that okay with everybody if I do the leadership stuff? I see Myra saying yes, but I just want to make sure everyone else is okay with it too.
Please do. Please.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. A little feedback's always good, right? A little feedback is always helpful. Thank you. Whether it's a thumbs up or a chat or voices, I appreciate it. So I think the other thing is, as leaders, right, and as people who are trying to help other people be productive, the very first thing that I try to do with all the faculty I work with is I really try to get to know them and their interests. Relationships are critical, and we can't treat our people like numbers. We have to get to know them. And this is helpful in so many ways. Because if we know what their interests are, we know what we can feed them that will help them be more productive. And if they're more productive, we succeed, right? That's our job, is to help them be productive. But also we can figure out where our gaps are a little bit easier, right? And we can figure out what we need to fill. And this brings my second point is hire the right people and get out of their way. And I think this is really, really critical. We've had to have a few hires, and what we've done is as Rouhani mentioned, we're going to hire you because you're good, but we're not going to interfere. Go be good. We're going to get out of your way and let you be really, really good. And I think that that's really important because that shows an element of trust as well, right? Eliminate unnecessary administrative stuff. I don't know, in Singapore, we just got overwhelmed with the admin, and it's just a killer, right? So streamline those processes wherever possible and eliminate them. And that's something that I'm working really hard to do here, is get rid of the stuff that's not necessary. And if it is absolutely necessary, make it easy, there's a checklist, a template, so that people know boom, 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 and they can move on and spend their thinking time on the stuff that really matters. Communicate often. Dr. Brené Brown always says, kind is clear and clear is kind. So that means be honest with people, be clear with people, and that's okay, right? That's actually being kind. Don't avoid the hard conversations, but you can still do it in a way that's very courteous and clear, and that's actually the best thing we can do for everybody. Rouhani mentioned this as well. I think as leaders, we have to recognize that part of our responsibility as academics is to influence public policy. And part-time that comes through newspaper articles, that comes through social media, that comes through those types of things. And so as leaders, we need to reward those as much as we reward a tier 1 journal, right? Those things are important. That's our job as academics, as experts in the field, is to influence public and policy. So we've got to figure out ways that we can really highlight that. And Rouhani brought up a great one, his department supporting him when he was doing that. Work with people, not institutions. Again, I mentioned this earlier, find great people, work with them regardless of their institution. Good people will produce. So figure out who those people are. And that's not always because of the name of the institution. I think this is really critical for leaders. And if you're a leader out there, please, you can eliminate everything else I've said, but please make sure you hear this one. Set a good example with your own work habits and your own wellness. If you're working 14, 15, 18 hours a day, then you're not setting a good example. Set your own boundaries and let people know that, you know what, this is not how we're going to work here, because it's not healthy. It's just not healthy. It doesn't produce any better work. And there's lots of data on this, right? It doesn't produce any better work, and it doesn't produce lots of more work, right? All it does is make people work longer hours and still produce the same thing. So set limits, set boundaries on yourself, and you have to be a good example. And then I think finally, the big thing is, figure out who your go-to team is. As leaders, it can feel quite lonely sometimes. And so I always talk about finding your table. So if you were to have a really important decision that you had to make and you were invited a few people over for a meal, who would those 5 or 6 people be? And as leaders, it's important that we identify those. And those 5 people that you're going to have at your table there should be 5 different people, right? One of them is someone that is a mentor to you. So who's older and wiser and has maybe been in that situation before. One of them is someone you're mentoring. So it's a mentee, because they're going to ask you some, what may seem like simple questions, but make you think, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought about that in a while. So someone you're mentoring, someone that is a mentor to you. The third one is someone who doesn't care about your work life at all, only cares about you as a person, because they're going to remind you what's important. And they're going to say, I know you're going to make that decision, but that doesn't seem like who you are, right? So they remind us who we are on the inside. The fourth thing is someone who's your hero. Now, this can be a figurative person. It could be Oprah Winfrey, or it could be someone that you think figuratively, who would I invite if I just wanted advice from someone? And so pretend that they were at your table. And the fifth person is someone who's very, very different from you. Maybe they're a different religion, or a different sexual orientation, or a different gender, or you know what I mean? But someone who's incredibly different from you. And you want those 5 people around you, so that when you have these hard leadership decisions, because we do, that we can talk to them. Because when you have those people, they're going to help everyone be more productive. And that's ultimately what our job is as leaders. So I think those are some of the questions. And hopefully, like I said, I'd really like to answer or have other questions as well. But I hope that was helpful on both a personal level and as leaders. So thank you so much, Myra.
Thank you, Zachary. Thank you, Ruwani. Before I open it up for questions from the floor, just a few clarifications. Ruwani initially talked about supervising 6 students during his first semester. Just to clarify, this is counted as teaching, correct? It's not part of service. Your graduate student supervision is considered teaching load. Did I get that correctly?
You're on mute, Ronnie. Yes, that is correct.
Yes, that's correct. It's teaching. So it's part of the teaching workload.
Okay, because I think one of the key questions being asked here in the chat room by Dr. Belbase, for instance, is what is the usual percentage when it comes to workload for research, teaching, and service at UCL? Can you clarify a little bit about that?
I can talk about it from our department. So we don't have an actual percentage piece. This is where we really play into people's strengths. So what we do is we have a 1.0 as kind of our scale. Everyone has to get a 1.0, but for some people that might be, so if you take a 1.0 kind of the idea of 1.0, then 0.2 is per day, right? So you have 5 0.2s in a week, right? That equal the 1.0. So some people might have 40% teaching. Other people have no teaching. They're completely on research contracts. Other people have 80% teaching and they get 20% for service, but no research. So again, this is where we really try to hire the right people who can do the right things. And then you've got, people like me who I have 20% research, about 60% of my load right now is leadership and management, and then 20% is teaching, which includes the graduate students. So it varies for everybody depending on their role, and it can sometimes vary between year. If you get a really big research project, then we'll take away some of your teaching that year, and that'll be assigned to someone else who's hired on sometimes those research funds. So I wouldn't say, unfortunately, I can't give you a specific figure because it does vary, but we do it by a 1.0 scale, and everyone is in different places depending on what their areas and strengths are.
Oh, yeah, well, it's actually a good question. I was taken aback by that question because just like Zach, I haven't been aware of the actual percentages really. Although I think technically, towards professorship, if I'm not mistaken, there are actually different tracks. So you can be full professor with a lot of service, focus on service. So I know someone, for example, who just became full professor because of her work along the lines of service. So you have these different tracks as well, like teaching and then research, and then so depending on that kind of demand, so you will most likely be given more of the teaching if you are given if you are on that particular track as well. However, so that's the technical part of it. But within my department, similar to what Zach is, much of the work is really negotiated. So it's not so much about, because I haven't seen, so far I haven't seen any numbers, being thrown at me and say, you have only been teaching 6 hours or 8 hours and so on. It's really more about, again, even here it's a question of trust, that you can actually negotiate with everyone. Next, it's a matter of figuring out where you are at against everyone else. And so I might have probably 6 dissertation students and not teach any other teaching at all, but someone else also has probably 4 and not teaching at all, and really doesn't matter to us. But I guess it works that way, because then probably this semester, I have 4 weeks of all 18 hours, and someone probably has about 24 hours as well of teaching, and also it really doesn't matter. All right. But I think the feeling is that, the understanding is that, as much as possible, you must be given space for research, and for as long as you are able to keep that space for yourself, I think the negotiation is a far better approach to me, rather than counting everything in terms of numbers.
I think there are also a few very interesting questions here from Dr. Hala. Dr. Hala is the chair of Special Education Department. Please go ahead, Dr. Hala. You have 2 questions here that are very interesting.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Meyer, for giving me this opportunity. I just, my first question, I thank you very much. At first, let me just thank Dr. Zachary Walker and Dr. Tupas for this interesting and very informative sessions. And your speech was really very, very interesting. I just had a couple of questions. My first question is about the administrative stuff. How can we eliminate that? I mean, that's something where it's part of our work, it's part of our duties, and definitely takes, it's very time consuming, but what can we do in terms of, get rid of some of it? And my second question is about, you talked about how, Dr. Walker, I guess you talked about how faculty members, you are like, I guess, classifying them based on their areas of strength, right? And you said some of them, they are doing teaching, some of them are doing research and so on. So who's deciding on that? Who makes such a decision in terms of faculty areas or the areas that they need to work on? Is it based on faculty decision or the leader's decision? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think they're really good questions. And so I'll start with the second one on kind of who determines where. So when we talk about faculty streams, they're based on strengths, but they're also based on interests. So we have some faculty who are really good teachers who want to move more into research roles. So we have mentoring programs where they can work with really good mentors that can kind of help them, along the research way. But it's always a discussion. It's not a I'm going to decide for you. Right. And as leaders, ultimately, we have the power to make the decision, but we really try hard to help people fit where they are and to keep their main thing. And if you have a good culture, and I'm sure you all do, but one of the things that when I first started kind of in some of the leadership stuff, my first thing was not processes. It wasn't any of this stuff. It was about culture. It was about making sure within our department, we had a good culture where we got along, we tried to help each other out, et cetera. And so that way, when you have someone who has to maybe, it doesn't always work out perfectly. Maybe they have to teach something that they don't really want to teach, but they understand, hey, this is part of being a team, and what we're really trying to do is help be a team. So it is always a conversation. It's never kind of a unilateral decision. That would be for how we kind of decide on streaming and things like that. As far as the administrative stuff, we can't get rid of it all. I think we all know that, right? But I can give you one example or a couple of examples. One of the things that we've worked really hard to do in the last couple of years is, for example, anytime we have research grants, right? And there's lots of research grants. Obviously, when you're at a place like IOE, and you all may have the same thing, there's so many opportunities coming in. Everyone wants to work with UCL, so there's so many opportunities coming in. But we have a very standard way. What we've had is we've had a very standard way of unifying this. So within our department, we have a little research committee, and we have anytime anyone wants to do any research, get grants or get funding, we have just a one-page template that they have to fill out to start with. It goes to a couple of members of the committee. They can just review it real quick, give some ideas before it goes into them filling out the huge research application part. This little one-pager is simple. It doesn't take more than 15 minutes to fill out. But what it does is it communicates to the department what's happening with research, and B, it helps them clarify the ideas before they go and fill everything out that takes all the time and it get rejected. So again, even though it seems like it's an extra sheet, it's actually helped condense everything into one page to start with. And then because of that development cycle, it takes away a lot of the unnecessary admin that we would have done before, where we're filling out this form or filling out that form. It's a one pager, it's quite simple, it's reviewed, and then it moves forward from there. So that's on the research side. I could give you lots more examples on class development side, but we can never get rid of all the admin. But what we can do is make sure that we're really, really clear and concise as possible. One more example real quick. We love to survey our students here at IOE and UCL. We feel like student voice is really important. So they get all these different surveys throughout the year. Well, one of the things we're starting to do now is to say, no, we're not going to give them all of them, because that means we have to analyze all of them. What we're going to do is be really concentrated, make sure that the one we do give is robust, it's a powerful tool, and try to really increase their participation on that one tool instead of worrying about having 6 or 8 surveys. So again, eliminating some of those things that are extraneous, or that there might be 2 or 3 things that are trying to do the same thing. Make it one thing, just make that one thing really, really good.
Yeah. Yes, and if I have to add to what Zach has also already shared, when I came in to the IOE, I had with me more than 20 years of research experience, and yet I was assigned a mentor, right? So mentorship, the mentorship program is not meant as a question of who is senior or junior in your research as well. So mentorship is about who knows the system, right? Because I may have more than 20 years of research experience, but I don't know the system. How do you navigate the system? Who are the people to talk to, for example? So the mentor that was assigned to me is someone that I really, really appreciate very much, because it cut so many lines along the way for me. Instead of me figuring out, he gave me advice on basically research proposals. So when you read documents on how, for example, you should come up with a research proposal, and the processes, sometimes the processes that are being described are not exactly how it is followed. So you have what you call unwritten institutional knowledge that you can actually do without necessarily breaking the rules, except that what is written on the document. So if you really just simply look at the document and read it as a first timer, then you will probably be overwhelmed by a lot of work. But the mentor assigned to you basically says, okay, do this, and do that, and I can help you out with that. Of course, a lot of that also in terms of research. Questions about what exactly are the expectations, what happens when your journal publications are evaluated, what happens inside the evaluation selection committee meetings, for example, and so on and so forth. I think these are very, very crucial in making yourself as well productive and knowledgeable of what's going to happen or what is happening within the particular institution as well. So I think that to me is very, very critical. Thinking of mentorship not simply as from the senior researcher to a junior researcher, that helps, of course, but I think it also is helpful when you look at it through a different lens, which is like senior in terms of who knows the system and who can give you the right or the helpful institutional knowledge to function very, very well, right? And then going back to the admin part as well. Yes, that's why I think I have in my earlier talk, I always point out the fact that it's very institutional. It's a institutional question, and therefore, if the institution is willing to make certain changes along the way, then that can actually help. I think a key question to ask to me is not so much about how do you, do away with admin work, is how do you rationalize what you're doing, right? Because if sometimes within an institution, things are the way they are because they are the way they are, all right? And so if we come back to the table and ask, which ones here are necessary and which ones here can, be eliminated, even if it actually takes time to, to reflect on it and so on, I think that can also help. So it's not about eliminating. I think we all work with admin work. We all deal with admin work, but is it what you need, for example? Because sometimes, and I think you have to agree with me, some of the admin work actually is useless.
And I would just pop in and say that's the stuff we have to eliminate. So I hear what you're saying completely, I think, but as leaders, we can oftentimes figure out what is useless and eliminate it if possible. Because I agree with you, Ronnie, some of it is at a personal level, it's useless, but we still have to do it. And in that point, yep, that's the leader's responsibility to step in and say, no, this is ridiculous that I'm asking Ronnie to fill this out. There's much better use of his time. So
I think this is now the perfect time to hear from the audience as well. I think we only have 6 minutes left. Maybe a few comments from our senior leadership, from our leadership team, or questions from the faculty, from the students. Really? No questions? Seriously?
Dr. Myra, it's Thursday afternoon.
Everyone is just raring for the weekend, very excited for the weekend. Okay, if there are no more questions, then maybe I will ask one question to Ruwani, because I think the fact that you are also a parent and you have like 3 kids, very young kids, well, not all young kids, but how do you manage in terms of family responsibilities and academic responsibilities, which I think would resonate with a few of my colleagues who have like 6 children, 5 children, and with the lockdown and everything else that's happening, I think this is very important. Yep.
Well, I guess, great question, to be honest, because you see here, the very first thing that my institution and my department really reminds us all about, especially during the time of the pandemic, is, go back to your families. If you have to drop everything else, for your family, drop everything else. And I think that's a really great message, a very, very comforting and reassuring message, especially in these times, where there are just so many concerns that you have. So it is not difficult for me to email and my director and said, because of certain family responsibilities, and so many times what has happened is that I was attending meetings while on the bus, and I was called, and you remember earlier at the start of my talk, I was asked to talk about my work outside the academia, my publications. That was the time when my director asked me to talk to in the meeting while on the bus, right? Everyone just simply accepted it and said, go ahead and fine, explain to me. So I think this is the kind of collegiality, and I think the collaborative culture that I was talking about. That whether you are speaking in front of the gate of your school, for example, of your students, of your kids' school, whether you're on the bus, I think there is a feeling of that you are being understood, precisely because above all you are a human being, and like you have a parent. So it all goes back to that to that particular provision.
Thank you, Ruwani. I think we have a hand raised. Dr. Ali Shahade, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Myra. Thank you very much, Dr. Ruwani and Dr. Zachary. I can't remember who mentioned that senior faculty, like fellow professors, can handle more admin work. Probably Zach, you mentioned that.
I don't know if any of us like it or can handle it more, but I think it's sometimes our responsibility once we move into leadership positions. Yes.
Correct. But here I'm talking about senior positions like fellow professors. Can't remember who mentioned that they have more admin responsibilities. On the one hand, the system is so good, but again, it's paradoxical because you are also expected to do mentoring, which is great, which is fine. But not only that, you are expected to be more productive research-wise, being senior. So how can it is so difficult to do more admin work, more research productivity, and of course, in addition to mentoring and teaching. I mean, mentoring and teaching you can manage, but look at research productivity, which requires time, patience, which requires, just like a clear mind. And at the same time, admin work requires a lot of long hours.
I hear what you're saying completely. And I think, again, this is where, as leaders and working with your leadership, whoever that is, you've got to figure out how to distribute it where you're balancing on people's strengths. And some people, we've got some really good people who just, I know this is hard for any of us to properly believe, who are really good at admin work. You know what I mean? They put in processes and they can chop through things, and that's a strength of theirs, that management side. But the idea of, and I see what we have here in the chat, is this idea as leaders figuring out who to delegate what to who. And then as senior professors and as full professors in some cases, it's our job to input what is not working so we can eliminate it. And again, I know I keep coming back to this, but eliminating the unnecessary admin and streamlining the stuff that is important can be helpful for everyone. Because then at that point, by the time you do it 3 or 4 times, again, you don't have to spend your mental energy on it. You can go and you can do it and knock it off pretty quickly, hopefully. And if it's that obtrusive, then we probably should really look at the whole system and how we have to adjust all of it.
Zach, I like your point of elimination and having a to-do list and not to-do list.
Yes.
I like that.
Good. Yeah, that's been really helpful for me too. So I'm glad that resonated.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think it's now 2:30. Maybe last few words from Dr. Najwa before we close the entire session. If Dr. Najwa is still with us.
Yes, I'm still here. I'm enjoying the talk, and thank you very much. Cannot thank you enough, Dr. Zach and Dr. Rooney, for this informative sessions. I was so happy with what have you shared with us in terms of your personal experiences at a very reputable university like UCL. I'm looking forward for more collaboration opportunities with you guys and hope to see you very soon on campus at UAEU. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have time anymore for further questions. We only have an hour. So thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate your time, your effort, your energy for attending. We know that it's been a crazy hectic time for us at the university. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Dr. Amira. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I think it's Dr. Babase for having your camera on. Thank you so much. That is so nice. Yeah, it's so nice to be able to see people. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much. It was indeed very nice talk. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you. It was good to see you.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
all right, Myra. All right, Ruwani. We'll catch up for some more.
All right.
For some more Southeast Asian food soon.
Yes,
Okay,
sure. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.